I hope you guys are ready for a great show. I've got 6 Bigfoot encounters lined up for you tonight, and some of these encounters are so strange and will absolutely keep you up at night. And you'll walk away with a lot of questions, but we're going to get into every single one of those. But before I do, I just want to say thanks for being here. Could not do this podcast without you. If you've got an encounter, I would absolutely love to hear it. You can send it to me by email at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. But let's jump right into these stories.
I'm originally from Southern California, grew up in Los Angeles. I ended up moving up to Northern California at some point in my life and ended up living in the hills of Southern Humboldt County and was kind of schooled in the living of the way they do it up there and country living. It was just so different from me coming from the city and stuff. And I had visited many times before that, before I made the move, so I was pretty familiar with the area and some of the culture up there. And one of the things being Bigfoot. I didn't, before I had gone up there, I had no idea that Northern California was kind of like a mecca for this stuff, and especially this region we're talking about here. And so I was headed to this top level that we had, and there was this steep dirt hill that you had to go up to get to this level of the property. And then there was this third level that was way down below. And so it was summer day, and I forget the year exactly, but it must have been like, if I'm guessing, maybe 5, 6 years ago. And it's summer day, and the property is heavily wooded, so I'm headed to this top part of the property, and it's hot, windows are down, and so there's woods on both sides of me. And I'm noticing on the left side of me, so I'm in my truck. I have a black Tacoma, and I'm going pretty slow, maybe 5, 10 miles at the most. And on the left side of me, I noticed in my peripheral vision, I noticed that something is like moving through the trees, almost like flanking me or like pacing me, moving parallel with me. And it's moving pretty quick. And it reminded me, I always mention this, it reminds me of one of those kids flip books, those cartoon flip books. I don't know if you remember, that you flip through and then you see like the anime kind of just play out. The book kind of goes anime on you. It animates, right? That's what I mean. And that's what it reminded me of. It was kind of like that, 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 that. And so I stopped my truck, and mind you, I have my phone next to me. At this point, I'm like really into documenting, and know that you got to have your phone ready whenever something's happening, and or something's about to happen. And then I noticed at the bottom of this old oak tree, it was a pretty big old growth oak tree. I noticed what looked like a face looking at me, and going back to the figure, when it was going by, it didn't seem huge. It just seemed like a dark black that I could see, but it did look like a humanoid figure, but it wasn't big. And so I'm looking at this face, what looks like a face at the base of this oak tree, just kind of like peeking at me from the bottom. And I'm just like having this stare down, and I'm like, oh my God, like in my head, I'm thinking like, am I looking in, wow, I'm like, this is it. And so it was jet black, and I couldn't see any shag or anything. It just seemed like perfectly head shape, jet black. And around the eyes that I could remember, you could kind of see what I would imagine be the skin, and it just kind of looked like a grayish behind there. And as far as like nose, mouth, I can't really tell you much. I just remember focusing more on like the skin around the eyes. And I couldn't tell if it really had like a conical shape head. It didn't, seem like that, anything weird. It just seemed like a, almost like a human type head, but just larger than a human's head. So I would imagine, if whatever the being or the subject was, it wasn't huge. And I couldn't tell if it was male or female or anything like that, because I couldn't see the rest of the body. And so we're looking, and I couldn't tell you exactly how long we must have had this stare down for, but it seemed quick. And I don't remember, I didn't grab my phone, I didn't record, and I don't remember the subject either leaving or anything. I just remember just driving off and heading up to the top level of the property where I was gonna go do whatever I was gonna do. And but I was shocked and surprised. I wasn't scared. Um, and there was no one around that I could tell at the time. My partner wasn't around. And so I just went on about my day, but I was super surprised and excited, and that was that. And I didn't feel any negativity or any, once again, any fear or anything like that. But that just, once again, pushed me more into this field. Yeah, so that was the first actual, like, visual, like, solid thing that I could say was most likely one of these things, and I do believe it is. And so yeah, we could fast forward on to the second time where I had something happen, and this is up in the northern part of the county. So anyway, one day I'm leaving Trinidad, heading on to the Highway 101, which is a major highway up here, southbound. And Trinidad is tiny, super cute fishing town, and super fun. And so I'm southbound, and I'm thinking it's around maybe fall, maybe around getting around this time, because I remember the sun was kind of setting, so it was like evening, maybe 5, 6 o'clock that I could remember, and I could see the sun setting, and it had just rained too, so there was like the highway was a little wet, and it was just a nice vibe, nice sunset. And there was like 3 or 4 other cars when I jumped onto the ramp of the highway. 3 other 4 cars that had already passed ahead of me. And at that time, I had noticed across the opposite side of the highway, which is a pretty big highway. I'm thinking it's maybe like 4 lanes, maybe 4 lanes, maybe 2 or 3 on each side, something like that, maybe 6 lanes. Anyway, pretty wide. I noticed the subject across the opposite side, and it was, once again, it was jet black, and it was super tall this time. It was really tall and thin. Okay, so it wasn't this bulky, when you think of Bigfoot, or no, it was like super lanky and tall. But I couldn't notice any like shag of hair or anything that could tell hair. It just, like, once again, it was just like a solid black cutout. And this thing starts to walk across the highway. So obviously on his side there wasn't any cars coming, but when it started getting towards the middle of the highway, the cars that had passed me up, I was thinking, all right, these cars, if this guy walks across, these cars are gonna either have to stop and honk or hit the brakes, or these people are gonna honk at whatever it is that's walking by. And you do get, uh travelers sometimes, kind of walking along the highway. Every once in a while you get bikers and stuff, so it's not bicyclist. So it's not, rare. Even hitchhikers, we still even get hitchhikers up that way, which is crazy. So it's not rare to see people, but this thing was a lot taller than your average I could tell it was something there. And so this thing's going across, and no one honks or anything. So I'm thinking, all right, this thing made it across. Once it gets to the edge of the highway on our side, I'm gonna be able to see who this is or what it is. And on that side of the highway, on my side of the highway, it's a steep drop off, and it's nothing but like redwood trees there. And if you were to keep going down that steep embankment, I would imagine you'd end up at the beach, because Trinidad has beaches there. And so no one honked. This thing must have made it across. So I'm like, this thing's gonna be on the side of the road when I pass by. And this is all happening quick. We're on the highway, and I pass by where I think this subject is gonna be, and there's nobody and there's nothing there. So I'm like, whoa, what? And so I'm imagining that whatever it was, or whoever it was, dropped down into that steep embankment. And when I passed by that part too, I kind of just try to peek over a bit, and I didn't see anything. And that was that. I know the encounters maybe are not too exciting, but it's just that's what they were. And those are it, man.
Encounter number 2.
Okay, so my experience takes place in the summer of 2015. I was just out of high school, and I think I had just got my first house. So I lived in a place in South Central New Mexico that is right directly alongside the Rio Grande River, which is the biggest river in the Southwest region where I'm at, right? So all the towns in New Mexico are kind of built alongside the Rio Grande. So you're never going to be far away from it, right? So rewinding the clock back to 2015, in that time in my life, I just experienced like my first breakup or whatever. It was nothing. So I had a friend over at the time who was a really dear friend to me. And this friend was just helping me through, keep my mind occupied. Like, hey man, let's go do this. Let's go do that. This kind of thing, So this friend and I, we decided one night, and this was a summer night, and I don't think there was any moonlight out. It was hot, and there was nothing to do other than to go drive around and hang out. So that's what we wanted to do. Drove around town for a little while, and then we decided, hey, let's go drive the river, because that's just one of the things that you do. There's many, many roads alongside the river that are like almost like secondary roads to the paved roads in that area, right? Like the river connects all the local towns together. If you can't get to it, from the main road, there's always another way to get to it, right? So we just drive the river, you go screw around, have a good time. So her and I, we decided, hey, let's just go hang out at this one little spot. There's like picnic areas and stuff. So we pull up to one of these picnic areas, and we're like, let's get out and walk around, because we were young, and it's just, I don't know, we didn't really use our brains that much. So we get out and we start walking. We get about maybe 60 yards from my vehicle that we had drove there in. And we're just walking, kind of casually talking with each other as we're walking. We're using our little old cell phones for flashlights. Another thing I should note is in this area, there are walking trails where we were walking at. However, it is in a super dense forest that is called the bosque, and bosque in Spanish means forest, but it's a really dense forested area that runs right alongside the river itself. There's no artificial lighting. All it is just pathways, and that's it. Like if you go there during the day, you can have a good time. If you go there at night and have no light, you're going to get lost and probably have a bad time. But we went there at night with our phone flashlights, like a bunch of geniuses. Anyway, going back into the story, we get about maybe 60 yards from the truck, and we're just walking, having a good time. And then I remember hearing from my distant northeast from where I was at. So it was behind me to my left. I'm walking south. My distant, please correct me if I got my directions backwards. But I'm just walking, and from the far distance, I'm talking way long ways away, I hear it's distant and it's not loud, but it's definitely distinct and noticeable. I hear the sound of a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. So that's what I hear for a good 3 or 4 seconds. And so we're kind of walking, we quiet up, we're listening. And then all of a sudden, as we're walking, that woman screaming, it changes into a chimpanzee. You'll know what I mean when I do it, but my voice doesn't go that high, but how the chimpanzees do. Does that make sense? So it changes from a woman screaming to a chimpanzee cooing, I guess you could call it. And then it finally ends out with the sound of a crowing rooster. So that was one call. That all happened within one call. And the whole call itself lasted about 10 seconds or so. So you can imagine you're walking through the dark forest at night and you hear something like that. So my friend and I were we stop and we look at each other and we're what the heck was that? And I remember I asked her, this is one thing that stuck with me. And you being former law enforcement, I'm sure you've been in this kind of situation before, where you look at somebody and you're just you look at them and they're just yup, So I asked her, hey, did you hear that? And she says, yup. So it's one of those moments where you're just okay, that's strange. So, us being very young at the time, we figured, it was nothing. Let's keep walking, right? Like, so we continue walking the exact same direction we had already been walking, thinking nothing was wrong at all. We get probably another 15 yards, 20 yards. This time while we're walking, we're being much quieter. We're still talking with each other, but we're just like, not as loud. We're not causing a ruckus, no, nothing like that. And we get about 15, 20 yards away from the previous location where we had heard the sound. And then this time we were stopped dead in our tracks because the exact same call started up again. Only this time, it was not a very long way away from me. It was like less than 100 yards away from both of us. And it was more to my left, which would have been my east in that moment, somewhere in the vicinity. But what I do remember about it, it was loud. It was so loud. It was like one of those things that you hear where you're just like, like you kind of have to like shrink away from because it's kind of piercing to your eardrum. So it was the same call again, a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. And then it changed from that to like a chimpanzee, like kind of cooing, I guess you could call it. I don't know if that's the exact word for that noise, and then it ended out with like the sound of like a rooster, like not crowing, but like the sound that a rooster makes, all in the same call. So when that happened, like her and I, we stopped dead in our tracks, and it was close, like uncomfortably close. So we looked at each other as the second the call was finished, like we look at each other, we nope our way up on out of there, and we decided I would rather live. So I didn't see anything when I left. I didn't see anything that I remember at all. When we got back to the truck and I drove away, we kind of had to double back, and then the road drove past that same spot where we would walk to. I didn't see anything at all. So, I mean, I was young at the time that happened. I didn't really think much of it. I really didn't. Like it was just a weird thing that happened to me, right? Like, I couldn't explain it. I thought maybe at one point, hey, maybe I heard a mountain lion or something, but any research into mountain lions, and then I've been hunting many times through my life, including, I've talked to a lot of people who have been mountain lion hunting, and as it turns out, they sound like mountain lions, but they don't tend to sound like much else, with the exception of the screaming. But if you listen to that specifically, you can tell it's not exactly a woman screaming, like you could tell, but they don't sound like anything other than that. Like their vocal range doesn't quite go that far. So remembering what I heard that night, I'm telling you, it wasn't a mountain lion, and I'm telling you, it wasn't a javelina. It wasn't a feral hog. It was not a coyote. I think it was a Bigfoot. And I think there was actually two of them. I believe that the one off in the further distance, the first call that I heard, was calling out some sort of locating call. I don't know why. And maybe they were traveling together. Maybe they were elation. I don't know. I believe that the second one that I heard that was closer to us maybe didn't know we were there. Maybe they were calling to each other, and maybe they were just curious about us, but I do not believe that they knew that we were walking in the direction that we were walking. I believe maybe I heard something that I really wasn't supposed to hear because they didn't know anybody was there. They may have, I may be wrong. That's just the conclusion that I've come to. So that's my encounter. My mom told me about one. After my experience happened, I told her about it years later. She told me about an experience that she had that I thought was very interesting. So this takes place, I believe, in the 2000s, I want to say, maybe 05, somewhere in that range. Maybe it's just a guesstimation. We lived about approximately 40 miles north of where my experience took place. And again, like I said before, all of the towns in New Mexico, they follow along the Rio Grande. So just imagine going 40 miles north along the exact same river. I was a small child at the time that this took place, along with my two siblings. They were younger than me. We were living in this fantastic home. This home was awesome, man. Like, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was fun. There was lots of room for us to run around and play. We had a great time while we were there. So my mom told me one night, my dad, he was away at work. He worked very hard for us. But my mom, she stayed home and she raised us. So it was me and my two siblings and my mom. And it was later on in the evening. And interestingly enough, she told me that it was about in summertime when this happened. And it was after me and my two siblings had been put to bed, and then my mother had laid down to go to sleep. And this was a very hot summer, so a lot of the windows inside the house were open because, I mean, AC systems weren't that great back in the day. Like, just something you did, just open the windows, get some airflow through there, and you don't have to cook alive. So anyways, she's laying down in bed. My mother, she is laying down in bed. Her window is open, and her window is directly above her bed where she's asleep. And it's the exact same thing with my siblings and I. Like, the window, that's where we sleep. Anyway, she told me that one night she was woken up by the sounds of a loud shriek that came from off in the distance. She told me that it was very loud. It was piercing. It was enough to wake her up when she was falling asleep. So that should tell you, like, it has, it's noticeable. It's different. Certainly not the usual sounds that you would hear in that area, right? So she tells me once that happened, she was woken up and she knew something was like off, something was wrong. But she said that she was very afraid in the moment, and like, she stayed there and she waited and she listened. And just a few brief moments after the first shriek called out, another one called out, and it sounded like it was right outside of her window that was open. She said that it was like almost unbearably loud. She said that it was like piercing, and it had like it had depth to it. And she remembered in that moment when she heard the second one right outside of the house, she was like kind of frozen, like gripped with fear in that moment, because you just heard something that you've probably never heard before, and it's right outside of your window. So she told me she heard the two calls, and then she heard the sound of loud footsteps coming right outside of her window, like right on the other side of the open window. And shortly, just a brief moment later, she heard the sounds of something heavy running away. So she said that as soon as she heard the noise of it running away, she was kind of able to get her faculties back, and she got up and she closed all the windows in the house. And kind of same thing as me, like, that was a really weird thing that happened. And then, like, we move on with our lives, like, interesting. So that was the experience that she told me. And I also have another one, if you're really interested in hearing about it. It happened about 15 years before. Well, no, maybe not quite that long. Maybe about 10 years before my mother's experience. My grandfather told me a story, and I've heard it all my life. Growing up, I've been out hunting with him. He always made it a big point to take me out, me specifically, out into the woods. We would go camping. He was like he was one of the main folks that taught me how to shoot, the rules of gun safety, all that stuff. I grew up with that, with him. And that's something I treasure even now in life. But just getting back into the story, he told me, and it's the same story I've heard my entire life. He told me that one night he was out camping with his son, who is my uncle, with my grandfather's brother, who is my great uncle, who is now deceased, and then my great uncle's wife. So it was the four of them, and they were out camping at one of the most fantastic places anywhere on planet Earth. And it's called the Mogollon Rim in Arizona. If you've been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's one of those places that you see that you don't question that there's a creator out there. It's just so unbelievably fantastic. What the Mogollon Rim is it's in the Arizona forest. It's on the central eastern side of Arizona, and it's a gigantic cliff in the middle of a forest with the valley that you can see below the cliff goes on for miles and miles in about 180 degrees of direction. And you could just see, and it feels like you can see like forever. It's truly breathtaking and amazing. And my grandfather, he took me there one time, and I'll never forget it. But going back into his story, he told me that he was there out camping, and this took place in the 90s when I was not yet born. My uncle was about 6 or 8 years old, and my grandfather, he was obviously a man, along with his brother and his brother's wife. So they got there to camp like they had done his whole life. You know, they're certainly not first timers. They were well armed enough to put fear into anybody that could have caused them, you know, hate or discontent. So they show up and they do their normal camp thing. You know, you set up, you have a great day, maybe shoot a little bit. You know, you have an awesome campfire at night. And then when it's time for everybody to go to bed, my grandfather had his own tent. My great uncle and his wife had their own tent that was only a short distance away from where the main campsite was. And then my uncle, he slept in my grandfather's truck. So it was the four of them sleeping in 3 different locations, all in the immediate vicinity of the campsite. So he told me that they had all went to bed and everything was totally fine, hunky-dory. Can't wait to wake up for another great day of camping the next day. So, except he was woken up at night by something that he will never forget. He told me at about 3 o'clock in the morning, he was woken up to the sounds of some of the scariest yelling and screaming he had ever heard in his entire life. He told me that he had heard coming from very close distance away at about 3 o'clock in the morning, the sound of something just yelling rah, 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 out in the woods. So he thinks, wow, that's really weird. You know, I guess I'll get my 44 Magnum, throw on my pants and go out and see what it is, right? Like a normal person. So my grandfather and my great uncle, they both get up, and when they get out of their tents, the campfire is significantly died down. It's just burned into embers. There's no light protruding from it. And he told me that from less than probably 50 yards away from their campsite, the yelling and screaming just continued and continued and continued. But it stayed in one spot. It wasn't moving back and forth. It wasn't circling around their campsite. It was standing in one spot, and it was yelling right at them because they were the only ones in that vicinity. And he said, like, he demonstrated, I don't have the vocal capacity to demonstrate, but he said, you know, it's just a really deep, like, groaning yell. And it was yelling specifically at them for being there. My grandfather told me, he said it was territorial. He just from the way the growl, or I'm sorry, the way the yell was sounding off, it sounded territorial, and it sounded like, get out of my territory, is what he perceived from when he heard that. So that carried on continuously for about 20 minutes. After about 20 minutes, the yelling and the hollering and all the ruckus that was coming from that specific area, it stopped. So they did the normal thing, and they're like, well, I guess we'll go back to sleep. So they did. So they go back to sleep, and they woke up in the morning, and they went looking for whatever it was, and they went to the area where they heard all the yelling and hollering coming from, and they saw nothing. absolutely nothing. Not a footprint, not a broken tree branch, not a tuft of fur, not a track mark or anything that would indicate something was there. They found nothing the next day. He told me, and he is still absolutely secure in telling me today, that was the Mogollon monster that was yelling at him, which is, if you're not familiar, that's like the regional word for Bigfoot in that Arizona region. So like, some places, different places call it different things. In that region of Arizona, they call it the Mogollon monster. And I think that dates back all the way to the Native American people who lived there before, if I'm not way off the mark on that. But that name's been there for a very long time. So those are 3 personal stories over the course of about 30 years that have happened to my grandfather, my mother, and I. And I didn't see anything that day that I was out there, but after the fact, like thinking about it now, all the way rewinding to the point when it happened, I think it was Bigfoot, and I think there was 2 of them. My mother will tell you she thinks it was a Bigfoot, and she thinks there was 2 of them. My grandfather will tell you he thinks it was the Mogollon monster, and there was 1 of them in his instance. But I just find it strikingly odd, and being in this line of work, how much is coincidental at the end of the day? Now, I'm not saying that, and let me refocus what I just said to say that I look at all of these things through a strict two lenses. 1, they have to pass the biblical lens, and number 2, they have to pass the logic test. And if they fail either of those, I'm sorry, like I'm going to have a hard time understanding it. So it passes the logic test with me because I'm not entirely convinced that mankind knows everything there is to know about the world around us. And I don't think anybody would be foolish enough to say we do. When I say that I don't think it's a coincidence, I don't mean that there's, some Bigfoot family following us. I think that it's interesting that it's happened to 3 different people. Maybe there's some spiritual reason behind it that I don't understand. Maybe they have nothing to do with spirituality, and it is just a coincidence. But probably not, right? You've been in this line of work, man. Come on. But those are our 3 stories that happened to my direct family members. I talked to all 3 of them very recently before I came on this, and they were happy and they were happy to hear that their stories would live on much longer than they will. They were happy to share it with you, and they were happy to share it with the rest of the world. And just to say that we're not the only ones, and we're not imagining this, because you don't imagine 3 different things 30 years apart to 3 different people.
Well, man, first off, I want to say I'm very honored that they were cool with you sharing that, and that you shared your encounters, because those are very personal things. And I agree with you, man. I think that there's probably something more to that story than what meets the eye. I don't know how to say that, but there's too many coincidences there, and I know I've talked to a lot of people, and generally if somebody's seen these creatures once, the odds of them seeing it again are really, really high. And I think you're right. I think you definitely had an encounter that night, and your mom and your grandfather too. So tell them for me that I appreciate them letting you share that on the story, and that I'm very honored to get it on here. But, knowing what you know now and that history that you have with your family, how has that encounter impacted your life, man? How has that changed your life?
Well, so it has changed my life more recently than it has when it actually occurred to me. Hearing these things that have happened to different people in my family and different stories that my grandfather has actually told me, that's not his only one. Hearing those things growing up and then experiencing it myself, and then looking back at the whole picture, that tells me that, 1, there's a lot we don't know out there, and there's a lot that God put here that we don't know yet, and we probably won't ever know the whole truth too, right? But it confirms to me that the people out there who have never seen this and immediately dismiss it, that doesn't hurt me as much as it used to, right? When somebody dismisses my story and turns it into a joke or whatever, and I have not told many people that story. Not a lot of people know. But the people that I have told, I've had good receptions from, and I've had less than good receptions from, and some of the people, like that I thought I would get a good reception from, I didn't. So like it changed me in that now I know something bigger is going on behind the scenes, and looking at the whole picture, it tells me that maybe God's got more of like a continual kind of plan and sense of humor, whatever you want to call it, whichever direction that ends up going. I'm not sure. I can tell you this, I've been careful what you wish for, but I've been praying to actually physically see something in a roadside crossing where I live now. There's a reported story on one of our absolute favorite of all time information websites for encounters. I'm sure I don't have to tell you the specific one, but you know the one. That specific website reports about 2 miles down my road here, roadside crossing sighting, however the heck you say that. So I've been like praying, hey man, like, do you think I could get me one of those like safely from my vehicle where I won't be in any danger? The good Lord has yet to respond to my request, but we shall see what happens with that. Oh, another interesting thing too was I looked on that same organization site of information to where my experience occurred in South Central New Mexico, and actually, interestingly enough, found the exact same thing: a road cross sighting about 7 miles away by the way the crow flies from where I had my experience at. 7 miles away from there, somebody else, approximately maybe 3 years later after mine, reported a road sighting.
It's strange to me how the dots connect. Like I talk to people all over the U.S. and across the world, and there's always something from each of these stories that connect and dots that connect, and then you finding that the roadside sighting from right close to where yours is, and going back to your encounter when you were a teenager, when you heard these, did you, besides just the obvious feeling of fear, but did you feel anything odd or did you smell anything at that time?
No, the answer to both is no. I felt only fear and retreat in that moment. I'm like, holy crap, that's right there. We are leaving. Like, that's it. I did not sense anything, mostly because, like, I'll tell you this, man, I was a dumb kid. I wasn't thinking about like, what is my body and my senses telling me about where I'm at. I was just thinking like, oh, what's the next stupid thing we could do with our life, right? So that being said, I didn't sense anything. I didn't smell anything. The hairs on the back of my neck only stood up when I heard it actually go off right next to me. That was the only clue that I got. Now, after living my life as much as I have between now and then, part of me thinks that maybe if I was paying attention in the moment, there probably would have been something to actually feel or sense or experience other than just the noise that I heard. But I wasn't open to it. So that's why I didn't hear it or experience it, rather. That's why I didn't see or smell or anything else.
That's a good answer, man. I think for guys especially, it takes us a long time to grow up, especially at that age. We're just, we take forever to grow up, and you did the right thing though. I mean, you get out of there because these things are extremely, in my opinion, extremely territorial, and they probably just wanted you out of their territory. I mean, that's probably what that was about. And they, I think that if you have an encounter with one, there's always another one really close by. So I think you're right. There were probably two of them. To me, it's really strange that you had two, your mom had two, kind of the same stuff. And going back to that, I think there's probably more to that. What that is, man, I don't know. And then, I'm like you, I look at these things through a very biblical lens, and it's got to fit inside that box, man. And I think these things are more than flesh and blood. And, this is a great time to ask you that question. I love to hear everybody's thoughts, man. But what do you think these things are?
Well, honestly, I believe they're flesh and blood. And let me just explain a little bit, okay? You did not get here on this earth without going through the hands of creation of God himself. And God was pretty specific on, the things of this world, other than the respect that we give to them, they are of this world. So I believe that the things that are here, with the exception of a lot of other things, I mean, we can cut that apart as much as you want, but specifically when it comes to Bigfoot, I believe that they're flesh and blood because, just look back at the discovery of the gorilla, look back at the discovery of the orangutan, that didn't happen all that long ago. Look back over this last year. In this last year of 2024 that's just passed, we've discovered 4 large mammalians that are alive on planet Earth that were unknown to science before 2024. I'm not going to dive too much into the discovery of the gorilla and the orangutan, but just people said they were there all along, and then everybody else said, no, you're crazy, they're not there. Like, that's really weird. You're just imagining it, or you're on drugs. And then boom, guess what? Only a few years later, somebody actually brings back like a specimen, like, look, they are real. They're a real thing. And maybe there's some sort of bottleneck of information that occurs when it comes to, in my opinion, the forestry divisions. You probably know a hell of a lot more about this than they will ever tell anybody. And, some government organization that's buried underneath miles of paperwork, they probably know a lot more about it, and for one reason or another are unwilling to come out and just say, yeah, they're really out there, and you're not crazy, and you're not imagining, and you're not on drugs. So it's for that specific reason that I think they're exclusively flesh and blood. Now, my own family members will disagree with me on parts of what I just said, and that's fine, because I think it behooves of all of us to respect the world that we live in, respect the things that we were given while we are here on this world, and to treat them with the respect that they're due. And in doing so, you will have some form of a spiritual connection to the world around you. And guess what? That's exactly what God told you to do. He said, he didn't just say you have dominion over this world. He said, man, come on, respect what I gave you. Don't just, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not a hippie or nothing like that, but I'm just saying, like, if you pay attention, you will see. If you do not pay attention, like me, when I had my experience, there will be nothing to see. So I hope that makes some kind of sense to you. I know you may agree or disagree, but that's just the conclusion that I've specifically come to.
Encounter number 3.
Myself and my ex-wife and her cousin, we had just got loaded in Longview, Texas with beer, and we were coming up to Durant, Oklahoma. Was where we lived at. As we were coming up through there, it was about 2:00 in the morning, and we were just on the Texas-Oklahoma line, and my wife and I were sitting in the front of the truck. Her cousin was in the back of the sleeper, which is where we sleep at. So she was back there asleep, and I happened to look up to my left, and I seen this big black thing come charging at me from across the road. It's a 2-lane road, so there's like a divider in between, stuff like that. And this thing was charging at me, and I was like, "What's a black cow coming at me for?" I couldn't figure out what that was. And then I realized it has 2 arms swinging. And I'm in a cab over truck, so I'm about 13 and a half, 14 feet off the ground. And I'm looking at this thing like it's just standing next to me. And then all of a sudden, it just come running up there, and it hit the side of my truck. Whenever it hit the side of my truck, mind you, I'm going down the road about 60 miles an hour. It hits the side of my truck and about turns me over. It was a tremendous impact. It hit the truck hard enough that it woke up her cousin up, and she got up here, was in the front seat, and I was trying to control the rig, and I felt it go all the way down the side of my truck. And I wasn't stopping because whenever that thing was right here by my window and I was looking at it face to face, yeah, I wasn't stopping. Everyone says in these later stories and stuff that they see red eyes. I didn't see red eyes. I seen yellow eyes. And I mean, they were as yellow can be. And it was looking straight at me as it hit. It was mad or was trying to run from something, and he just didn't time it right, or she didn't time it right, and she hit my truck. Well, I got it under control, and I kept on going. I didn't stop. Some people say you should stop. I didn't stop. I kept on going. I know that there was a truck stop about 10 miles down there on the left-hand side. It was a Choctaw truck stop where they just built a casino, and they had some truck parking. So I got in there and stopped, and we were all shaking, and we didn't know what it was. We thought we hit a human, or we hit a cow, or we hit something. I told him it wasn't no cow that I ever seen with two arms swinging. So they called the sheriff's department because I had blood and hair all the way down the side of my truck. And now, mind you, it's halfway up on the trailer, halfway up on the truck. So that thing would have to have been over maybe 8.5, 9 feet tall. When there were, it was big. I mean, it was big enough that it took a tractor trailer that was weighing almost 81,000 pounds and pushed me over and almost made me lose control. Of course, it was startling. It was a wake-up call because you couldn't, we're in a normal society, and some abnormal come out and said, hello, what are you supposed to do? So sheriff's department came out, highway patrol come out. They looked at my trailer. They went down. I contacted the Texas Highway Patrol. They came down there. They didn't see nothing. They didn't see no blood marks, no dead cow, no nothing there. But they could tell by the skid marks that I had left on my truck, where it had hit me, that they could tell where it happened at. But like I say, they couldn't figure out what it was. But it damaged the whole side of my truck like I had hit a post or something like that. It had pushed it in and damaged all the way down the trailer. And I got back, and they unloaded the beer. My boss wanted to know what happened, and I told him. He just looked at me like I was crazy. In fact, he had me go and take a drug test just to make sure I wasn't on drugs. But then the sheriff's department verified my story, and it just went down on the annals of, oh my God, what was that?
Yeah, that's what you would call a life-changing experience for sure. And I know that you spend a lot of time out on the road, and you've been a truck driver for a long time, and you see a lot of different things. I don't think people understand how massive these creatures can get, being in a truck and it being right there at your, window looking right at you. What was going through your mind when that thing was right up next to you?
I was trying to rationalize it. I was trying to figure out what is this? What is this? But the only thing I could come up with, this is a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, because why else? I mean, it was ape-like, ape and human mixture. Its face, it was hard to describe it, but you seen it, its eye. You could, even as brief as I seen its eyes, you could tell there was intelligence there. There was because I think it was more surprised that I was there than it was, it intentionally hit me. But I think it was just surprised that, hey, there's a semi truck there. I don't know how you could miss me, but I was there, and it was startled.
It's kind of crazy, as intelligent as these creatures are, that they do that. I don't know why they do that, but coming from a former law enforcement, you never know what kind of calls you're going to get. And I can imagine hearing that call. That was probably not something they expected to hear that night. But what did you put down on the report when you told them what had happened, and how did they react?
At first, the officers thought I was crazy. The highway patrol and the sheriff's department both thought I was like, hey, we got a driver here. In fact, one of them wanted to do a field sobriety test on me to verify that I hadn't been drinking. And then again, they thought maybe he killed somebody. So, that was a mixture of suspicion and really more suspicion than anything. They didn't know what to think of it. But once they got to getting down there and they seen where I actually hit whatever this was, and then they got to looking at how tall that was, they realized it wasn't a human. In fact, the poor sheriff's deputy, he said, I don't know even how to write this up. I'm just going to put up as you hit an unknown animal hit you. And that was the only way he could do it. Even the highway patrol was like, he was just about ready to retire. He'd been an officer for 30 years, and he hadn't had no idea what it was either. He told me he had heard reports that there was Bigfoots in that part of the country, and he was laughing whenever he said it because you can't be an official person and admit to something that is fictional.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. It's one of the things about that job is you just never know what you're going to see and what kind of call that you're going to get. And I can imagine out of his career, that's probably the strangest call he probably, ever received. But how did that change your life? I know that seeing something like that had to change your perspective, and being on the road all the time, I'm sure you looked a lot more often for something like that,
Oh yeah, I do all the time. As truck drivers, we're out here all hours of the night. We cover a lot of territory in a year, but I've seen a lot of weird things. A lot of fellow drivers have seen a lot of things, and they don't want to come forward because they don't want to be drug tested, or they just don't want to be people thinking that they're crazy. But yeah, a lot of us drivers, we see things that normal people don't see during the daytime and at nighttime.
Yeah, you guys see a little bit of everything, and appreciate what you do for our country, man, because without you guys, we wouldn't be able to operate. So very vital part of our country. So I appreciate what you do. I know that you had mentioned that you had some other encounters, and if you're open to it, I would love to hear about those experiences if you want to share them.
Oh, sure. Back in 1976, my wife, well, not my wife, excuse me, I was 6 years old, so I didn't have a wife, okay? But my mom and dad, my brother, my sister and her husband and their kids, her kid, we went out to Washington State. We had moved out to near Wenatchee, Washington, and we were working in what they call a cherry orchard. And so there was a bunch of us camped in this cherry orchard. It was near a forest and near some mountains and things. And in the middle of the night, one night, there was something came down, and it knocked over several trees and rattled some trailers and stuff like that. It rattled our trailer. My brother got scared, came running inside along my sister and her husband, and we all got into one trailer. And whatever this creature was came up there and was rocking this trailer like you would like a toy, back and forth, back and forth. And my dad's not a person that got scared easily. My dad had been to Korea. He had been a machine gunner, so he had seen a lot of combat. And my dad never got scared. But that's the first time I've ever seen my dad get scared. Because, like he said, whatever that was big. Because next day they got out there and they couldn't believe that they seen gigantic footprints. I remember as a kid, I thought it was as big as my body. And my dad was like, nope, we're done. We quit. And everyone left the orchard.
Well, I don't blame you guys for leaving. That's something you really don't want to mess with. It's funny that you mentioned that. I've got a really good friend of mine, Daniel, who's been on the show quite a few times and had a lot of experiences with Bigfoot. And he had a real similar experience when he was a kid. This thing come up on a night when it was storming and, hit their trailer and knocked it off the foundation type of a deal. And it makes you wonder why they do these kind of things. What do you think it wanted that night?
I think it wanted to tell us it's his territory that we needed to leave. Just like a bear will mark its territory and stuff like that. I think they're just like that. I think they're marking their territory, letting you know, hey, this is my place. You're in my place. I don't want you here. I want you gone. I've heard stories like you. I've heard several stories about one lady up in Colorado that it attacked her house every night and was hitting on her house and stuff like that because it didn't want her there. I think they're very territorial. I think they range in many areas and stuff like that. And I think they just mark their territory. That's what if you get in their territory, they're going to say, hey, yeah, you need to leave. This is my home.
Encounter number 4.
My first real encounter with what I believe was a Bigfoot was in Arizona. And my dad was a fisherman, and he taught us, as I said before, he taught us how to survive and whatever. He was Cherokee Indian and grew up during the Depression. So he knew how to hunt, fish, and made sure each of us boys had that skill. So here we are, and I can't remember what year, but it was probably 1972, something like that. And we're out on the river fishing, and it's not a roaring river, at least where we were. So you could hear some water in the background. And all of a sudden, Josh, there's rock probably about so big around on the shoreline. And so it's a dam there, you want to call it that, or a way to direct the water. And so we're sitting there in the boat anchored and we're catfishing. And all of a sudden we start hearing somebody on those rocks walking. Now, I can tell you that the best of my recollection that it was bipedal. It wasn't a deer. It was way bigger. It just, the rocks were moving. And so it kind of spooked my dad a little bit, or got his attention. And so my dad said, "Hey, shine that light." And I had one of those 6-volt lights or whatever, with the battery in it. And that's what they had back in those days. And so I shined it over there and I'm scanning the shore, and looking. And I didn't see anything. And then the walking stopped. And so I'm like scouring the shore with that light, and there's nothing there. And so my dad made the comment about, if it keeps up, I'm going to break the gun out or whatever. And so he thought it was human too, and we never did figure it out. So we didn't talk about it, but it was something there that, we'll just say, for better terms and words, was invisible, not seen with the naked eye, and there was no weeds to hide behind. All that I can remember was these rocks there, and that was it. So it kind of got my attention, and I think we talked about it maybe once after that, in the fact that whatever happened happened, and we don't know what it was, so we just chalked it up. Back in those days, you didn't talk about that stuff much, and so we just chalked it up as the unknown. And that was my first real encounter with something that was walking that I could not see. And so at that point in time, I didn't know anything really about Bigfoot except for what I've seen in uh, books or maybe a TV show. And of course, the Roger Patterson event had happened, uh, just years before. So a lot of people didn't know about that film, and didn't know much about Bigfoot and the articles out there. And so I would say about my next one, I would think this would have been about 1983. And we were in the Lawton area, and we were survivalists, And so that's part of the reason I decided to join the Army and do my part. And so we had a small group of about 8 individuals off the top of my head. And we would break up in different teams and go out, like that night. And the other guys might come out the next morning or late night. And we had CB radios. I had one, my brother had one. And so we would know when those guys were coming. We didn't have cell phones back in the day. And so I'd watch, my watch and say, "Hey, yeah, they're going to come here. We're going to meet here at 3 o'clock." And then if we didn't run into them at 3 o'clock, we try it, 3:34, maybe 5, and about that time we could make that connection. So my buddy and I, that I joined the Army with, we decided to go to hunt something to eat, a rabbit or something, and we had our guns, and a lot of those were back in the day were AR-15s, were in camouflage. We got, we're loaded out, so to speak. So I think we'd be a force to kind of be reckoned with. So we go off into the woods and we're hunting rabbits at a full moon night, and we're thinking it's a wheat field. We should see something. We're going to shoot a deer, but a rabbit and cook it. And so all of a sudden, Josh, we started hearing whistling, and we didn't know that. Uh, I do now that Bigfoot could whistle, and so it alarmed us, and it was 2 or 3 that basically surrounded us. So we're looking forward. We're in this wheat field, and the grass is maybe this tall or what. And so now we feel surrounded, and our guys are back at the camp, and so nobody should be there. And so what got my attention was whoever it was whistling, knew we were well armed. So who's going to confront a well-armed person dressed in camouflage in military style? And so they don't know if we're, the Rangers that have gotten off the post, or lost soldiers or whatever. How would they know? They wouldn't know. And so that kind of spooked me. And so we decided to get back in the brush, so we'd have cover. And so we started doing covering maneuvers, ready to fire if we had to. We're scared, kind of, sort of. and the whistlings continue, not a lot of it. And as we got back in the brush, I don't know how large it was. I have no idea to this day. There was a creek nearby, and we didn't go even look at the creek or a pond. But all of a sudden, what you heard was a very large object. I would say at least 80 pounds splashing in the water, just zoom, And so that scared us. And so we worked our way back to camp and told the other guys, I said, somebody's out here with us. And they thought we were making up. We are like, no. And so the other guys got there, told them, and we stayed up all night for the most part with people on guard because we knew somebody was in the woods, but there shouldn't be anybody there. The landowner said, no, you guys can use this property. And the guy that had gotten us permission um, said that the guy had um, teenage sons and that they were probably the ones playing a prank on us. And I knew that wasn't practical because I don't think I would play a prank on somebody like that when they're well armed. And that was, I guess, my um, number two experience with, I'm going to say potentially Bigfoot. I didn't see him. I didn't even look for tracks. We just let it go. And what I'll tell you is that this is the Lawton area by Fort Sill, and if I were to head north from this location area, you're going to be at the on the wildlife refuge, and not only that, boarding to the south of the wildlife refuge is Fort Sill, and so a lot of soldiers I hear from other sources have had encounters with Bigfoot, and so if anybody's ever been in the military, I wasn't in that long, but you don't talk about those things. You don't want it in a report, your name associated with it. So a lot of these guys have to come forth and say, well, I can tell you this one time and kind of, speak about it in somewhat anonymity and say, this is what happened. This is what I experienced or somebody else did kind of second or third person, And so there's a lot of that that goes on, and I've heard some stories here and there. So I want to let you know exactly where that location was for the most part, and it was between Lawton and Cache, Oklahoma, which I used to own some land down at Cache, and people would say things and see things one on one sometimes. So I know there was something down there. I just can't say for sure it was Bigfoot. I will say the overall experience, it was probably Bigfoot. I mean, we didn't hear any, growling or see any red eyes or much of anything. So I think they were just kind of trying to let us know they were there, kind of thing. But my next experience, I would say, was probably in the early 90s that I recall. And I was deer hunting on some property that my grandmother owned out by Hinton, Oklahoma. And this was kind of strange. We were deer hunting, and I was off in the woods, and there was a trail that I know the deer came down. And so I was far enough off in the brush, we'll say, 30 feet in thick brush, and there were cedar trees and whatever. And I heard something coming, and I'm thinking maybe it's a cow. There were cows out there, but you could tell the clomping of their feet, the hooves hitting the bedrock or whatever red rock out there. And so I knew it wasn't a cow or a deer. They sometimes can, hit a rock or whatever and click their feet. And so whatever happened, this thing is walking and it's heavy, and I knew it was bipedal, it wasn't a cow. And so I wanted to go check and see what the heck it was. And all of a sudden, telepathically, and of course, I'm a twin, and twins are more susceptible to telepathy than others typically, not always. And so something spoke to my mind, and it was a male voice, and said, do not come out here. And, it was pretty harsh. And it was harsh enough that it really got my attention. And it was almost like a threatening voice, you know, and so I didn't go. And so I just let it pass. And after about 10 minutes of standing there, I decided there was some places that had dirt that you could see, tracks, deer tracks and cow tracks and whatever. And I wanted to see what this thing was. And so, I've been hunting my whole life, and so I knew how to track. And so I walked this stretch of land on the cow trail, probably 50 yards maybe, and I couldn't find any tracks whatsoever. And that's when I knew that something had happened. It didn't tell me when I say it what it was, but I knew it happened. And these are kind of some of the experiences that you can't talk to other people about because all of a sudden the Twilight Zone music playing in your head, or they're thinking it too. And so I don't know. I can't say for sure exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure it was the big fella myself. And my father-in-law at the time, he was hunting in the brush too, about 50 yards south of me, and along a cow trail. And I didn't even tell him. I wasn't going to tell him because you got no proof of anything. And if you were to tell them, they're going to think you're kind of nutty. So I just kept it to myself. And, I had registered these things in my head and said, this is evidence, some evidence, and it's very subjective and personal of to me. And nobody else would believe it. I would believe it, I'm just saying, until you have that experience. And then the third time that I had an experience, this is the first time I saw one, but we'll just say in western Oklahoma, not far from El Reno. And so I was dealing with some tribal people out there. I was out there with them and I let them know my background. So they understood and invited me to go with them Bigfoot hunting. So I did. And they told me, Josh, about what they would do. They would sit and listen, and they would have a big boombox with them with a cassette recorder on it. And it would take these noises and say that Bigfoot makes all these sounds like owls and other animals. I didn't know that. And so I sat there with them, did it a number of times. They showed me pictures of foot tracks where they had the ruler there. These things were like 15 to 17 inches in the dirt. And they didn't show that to people, but they showed it to me. And so I began to see that they weren't lying. And just to back things up, my dad told me the only thing I have in life that's worthwhile is my honor and my word. And if you're an honorable person with your word and you're truthful, then people will respect you. And he learned that as an Indian, and he told that to all of us. So I respected that. They respected it. So even though I know that stuff could have been fake, I had to rely on these Indian people that their word was true. And so I knew their word was true. And that's the only thing they had. And so um, we're out there, and I'd been there 3 or 4 times minimum doing Bigfoot hunting with them. And we divided up, and I went down the road. I can't remember what happened. And I'm standing down the road, probably maybe 60 yards, 80 at most, and there was a street light. And so there's a 2-lane road. And so I saw this, we'll just say creature, cryptid, whatever it was, very tall. When I say that, probably 8 feet tall. I can't say exactly. And it's night, and the street light's behind, and there's trees in the way. And so you've got this background. So all of a sudden, what I see is a bottom half of what appears to be a man dressed in black. And I could see its legs, and it took 3 steps to cross the road. So whatever a 2-lane highway is, this thing took 3 steps to cross the road, which is not a man and is fully impossible. I was the only one that saw it. And so with that said, at one point I saw the legs, right? And then the light broke in and I saw the upper torso, and it was that of a man. But this thing is moving very quickly because it walks, it has a good spread. So it's not trying to walk fast; it's just doing what it does. So we would have to take at least 2 steps for its 1 step. So we would say walk quickly. So I got to looking at it, and about 10 minutes later, not that I was afraid, I tried to cross that road in 3 steps. Now, I would have to leap and maybe cross it in 4 if I leapt, and I'm just under 6 foot. And so I knew whatever I saw wasn't a man, and it didn't scare me. And so I told these guys, and they said, "Yeah, that's where he crosses at." And come to find out, I'll just reiterate that they had saw this thing too at times, and it liked horses. We'll just say that. And then that's what they told me. And so at that point in time, I knew that whatever I saw, you can't explain. Somebody like a famous basketball player, they could cross a road in 3 steps, but they would have to jump. But whatever I saw was very smooth, and it didn't have to leap or anything. I mean, just 3 steps and cross the road. So at that point in time, that was my first visual encounter. In fact, I've taken other people there and showed them and said, I don't care what you believe. When you see it, um, you'll know. And of course, people would say, well, you saw it by yourself. Yeah, that's true. But um, trying to explain things and let people know, they're going to think it's their imagination. So did I have proof? No, I had proof for me.
Encounter number 5.
When I was little, my uncle was in the military, and they were doing maneuvers out in the mountains, and he told me that he saw Bigfoot up there, and that was when I was like probably 8 years old, and it always stuck with me for years and years. And just like around 2010, I was watching Finding Bigfoot, and I saw, I don't know, a few episodes of Finding Bigfoot, and then I got online because I heard on one of the episodes something about um, his website, so I checked it out, the BFRO, and I saw they had a sighting around my area, and I thought that's really cool. I'm gonna go see if I can, something can happen for me. So I saw it was on the La Jolla Indian Reservation, and that was probably about 40 miles from where I live, and that's in San Diego County. I know it's kind of crazy, San Diego County, right? Bigfoots. Um, so I went up there, and well, come to find out, you have to pay to be in there, and I couldn't pay every time I wanted to go Bigfoot, and I wanted to go a lot. And well, the sighting was the guy was walking down a trail, and a Bigfoot came up and was crouched down on the trail that he just went down, and he felt like somebody was watching him. Turned around, and it was crouched on the pavement on the trail, and it actually left a gift for him, and then it took off. And so that intrigued me a lot. And so I went back home and checked the map and just to see where would be a good place for me to go. And I've been up in that area quite a bit before, but never thought there would be a Bigfoot in that area. And so I just kind of followed the San Luis Rey River back up the mountain. And then I noticed it crossed the highway, Highway 76. And then once it crossed that, then it cuts into the woods, and it kind of shapes like a pie. So from the highway and like this, it's like that. There's the main road and it's the service road, and there's a gate there. And then as it goes farther in, the pie gets wider. And then at the other end, where the crust would be, is another road that goes the backside of Palomar Mountain. And right beyond that is the Lake Henshaw Dam, and that's where the water comes from. Is that lake? So I got my stuff and I headed down there to. Sorry, my neighbor is doing some work over there. Um, so I got my stuff. I went down there and I went underneath the bridge and I set up my little structure, or whatever, to camp out. And I planned to be there for 3 days. I told my ride to leave, and I didn't want nobody to know I was there. So I stayed there for 3 days. I went down to the water, came back up, go down to the water many, many times with my other dog. And nothing ever happened. So I was kind of bummed out, you know. So I put my stuff at the top of the hill by the road, and I was waiting for my ride to come, and I was getting bored. So I walked across the road on the other side of the bridge, and so now the road's on my left hand side, and I can see the guardrail. I can see down the road, and nothing's coming. And I'm looking straight down to San Luis River. I'm on the other side of the bridge now, and I see a tree. It's kind of obstructing my view to see the rest of everything else. But I see the water and a little bit of the ground on the other side. And whatever was down there that obviously was watching me for the 3 days um, saw my legs and my dog, and it turned, I guess, to run off and hide. Well, it hit a tree and it broke the tree down. It was so loud. I thought a car flew off the bridge and hit the tree. I looked and I'm like, I didn't see a car. And so I ran across the road and I threw my other bag down on the other side of these huge rocks they used as barriers. There's a bunch of them. So nobody drives down next to the bridge. So I hit those and I went walking. I walked for about 2.5 miles to get to this little picnic area. There's a phone there because there's no service there. And so right when I got to the phone, my ride came. And I'm like, wow. So I was really intrigued at that point. I was like, I got to come back even though I'm scared. This is what I want to do. So I called my uncle. He doesn't know anything about me doing this stuff. And he's not a believer that I know of. We'd never talked about it. And so I told him, hey, there's a place I want to go camping, and we do camp a lot. And I found a new place we can go. He says, all right, let's do it. So on my birthday, a week later from now, it was in December. So everything's darker, colder, wetter. And it was December 6th. And then we came down, the ride dropped us off. We went down where I heard the tree break. We went on that side and went down into the flood zone where if the dam opened up, busted open, it would flood that whole area. And now this area has never been maintained, so there's a lot of down, sapling trees, whatever, and then leaves and trees and leaves over decades and decades. So it'd be hard walking in certain areas. And so we found a good spot that didn't have a whole lot of poison oak. And we're right next to this wall that back in the day must have some structure there. And it made a waterfall. So it was a brick wall there. And it's very old. And so we went down there and we started breaking sticks to make a fire. And we built up all of our sticks, that we needed. And we made a A-frame tarp shelter and it kind of sloped down and put a stick on the middle so it divided us where we're going to sleep at. So it got pretty dark, so we set our fire up and got in our shelter, and we're just sitting there on our elbows, and we're just talking. And he tells me that he hears somebody or something talking beyond the waterfall. I mean, he has really good hearing. My hearing's not that good. So I'm like, really? And I know, by listening to all the videos and all that stuff, that how they talk, like jabber, you know. And I go, well, what's it sound like? And he described exactly like what I know, right? And I'm like, so he's not lying that he's listening to what they sound like, because he wouldn't know, you know. And so I'm like, okay, that's crazy. So they are here, which was very exciting. And so I ended up drifting off asleep. We both did, because eventually it stopped, and we just drifted off to sleep. And then around 11:30, fire went out. It was cold, and I got up and I told him, "Get up, we got to get more firewood because we've been feeding it throughout the night, you know." And so we got up and I put our headlamps on. We got all the sticks together, and we're starting to stoke the fire back up. And I'm sitting down on my knee and my foot kneeling down and facing him. His back is toward the river. My back is toward the service road up on the hill behind me. And he's all like, Lewis, I hear something walking over here. And it's a big, huge rock. The rock is probably as big as this garage. And it's huge. and he heard something walking up to that. And I'm like, what is it, like a deer or what? And he's like, no, it's on 2 feet. I hear something walking. And so I started popping my mouth with my finger, and I did it like 8 times. And then you can clearly hear it walk out from behind the rock. And it took, because remember, I was telling you all the branches going down and the leaves covering it under the undergrowth. And you can hear it walk from that to the river. Took 7 steps, went through the water, freezing cold, knocked on a tree, and then you can hear it drop whatever it was they used, and then walked across the river again. And then now it's on the other side of this big old bush with a tree, and it has a huge rock there. It's on the other side of that. And I grabbed my uncle from behind. I hug him, I'm like, dude, this only happens on TV. And he looked at me like in disbelief. He's like, you're trying to set me up. That's what he's thinking. And that's typical with him, because he doesn't want to be played. You know what I mean? So he went in the tent. So I'm like, I'm not staying up alone. This is my definite Bigfoot, encounter. Like something happened. It was like, so I flew in that freaking shelter out. I'm not staying up, because it's like right there. It's like maybe 10, 15 feet from me, And so I got in there. And so after that, the next day, I tried to walk from that rock to the water, and it took me well over 15, 16 steps, and I was trying hard to get over there. And it was stumbling and falling because of the ground is all, the undergrowth was thick, but it did it very easily to get over there. So that set me off right there. That was it. So then now after everything after that was come out, and something may happen, something may not happen, but I'll just talk about the things that actually happened. And they're just little pieces of here and there when I come out. So I ordered me a trail camera. I tried the trail camera many, 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 many times. They don't like it. So I don't use it much anymore. I did one time, I tricked them. So I came in there and I thought this out, and I worked at the hospital. So when they do sanitizing instruments, they have this aluminum box, which they lock down, and it has a bunch of holes in it. So they put all the bloody instruments in there, and they submerge it into sanitize it and in hot sanitation. And they were going to throw that one away. So I'm like, no, give that to me. So I took it and I put apples in there, and I took it down where the hot zone where they go down all the time. And I tied it on a rope onto a tree. Now this video is on my channel. It's North County Bigfoot, which is a dead channel because I got hacked. And so I put it on the tree, and then I grabbed more food and I put it on this rock in front of the tree right next to it. So I put like apples and a couple other things up there to attract smaller critters, is what I was hoping for. And right in front of that was a tree, and I put my trail camera there. Now I know the Bigfoots are not going to come out and mess with the camera or the food on the rock. With that camera there, it's not going to happen unless they kill the battery or they make digital pictures on my camera again, because they make it look like a black and white checkered board, and all of a sudden they don't take pictures at night, camera. You get it home and it works perfect. And so my batteries last normally 4 months, 3 months, and they will die in 3 days, easy. And so I set it on the tree, and so I left, and I came back, got the camera, took it home, did some checking out the tree. And the tree, you can see on the bottom left, there's 2 little branches coming up. There's just weeds, and right inside there, you can see eye shine. Whatever was down there leaned over like this and was looking at the camera, and you can see white eyes. And then in the tree in the middle, there's like, it's hard to see it, but you'll see an eyeball up there. And the eyeball down at the bottom right, when you look at it, it's bottom left, and up in the top middle, you'll see an eyeball there, and I have arrows going to them. And I replayed the same footage twice because I couldn't put two arrows at the same time on the tree. So it plays it, shows one eyeball, and then I redo it and play it and watch and see the other eyeball that's up there. But when those two gone, you'll see both eyeballs disappear at the same time. So they are real. They're not like a star, or a whatever it may be that somebody might come up with that it might be. But if they disappear at the same time, then obviously it's something. And then there was a fox and a possum or something like that took the apples off the rock, which was triggering my camera to take pictures. That's how I got the pictures of the eye shine in the tree, because the Bigfoots weren't going to trigger it. So I had to use the small animals to make it happen. And they kept on looking inside that tree, like, especially the fox kept on looking over there. So you can check that out. It's pretty cool.
You're definitely in a hot spot, man. There's so much activity going on there, and it's really cool that you stumbled upon that and you took the due diligence to find that area. I got a lot of questions, and there's a lot to unpack there. But one of the first questions I like to ask people on my show, man, is how did these encounters, how did that affect your life, man? How did that change you?
It opened my mind to a lot of things. Like I was always, scrutinizing or, I heard one guy talking about an encounter and he was saying, oh, it has a snout and this. Now I'm like, yeah, right. And maybe he's mistaking, it's something else. Or, I was a Bigfoot believer, but I wasn't a dogman believer. And that snout thing. And I don't do that no more. Because I was always a Bigfoot believer, but I didn't know, like, after all these things that's been happening to me, I don't doubt anything anymore, and I keep an open mind to everything, even after my podcast thing. Especially then, like yourself, hear a lot of stuff, and then it's all amazing. It's like, and I feel sorry for the people that are not as open minded. Maybe they have that certain blockage that they just can't understand, they can't comprehend my stepdad will never. I mean, one can slap him in the face and he'll say, it's not real. Even though they left a red mark.
I get it, man. I talk to a lot of people that are like that, man. And no matter what evidence you throw at them, they're not going to believe it. And I think it comes down to they just don't know what to do with it. Cause it's something that, our whole lives, it's not supposed to be there. And, I am fortunate to be able to talk to a lot of people that have these experiences. And so, I think people just don't know what to do with it. But why do you think they're on that piece of property? Why do you think they hang out right there?
Well, it's a perfect spot because you can see if you do an aerial view of it. I'll give you GPS location. There's water there. They don't have to cross the main road to get to the water. There's plenty of deer, plenty of food over there. They have thick cover. The mom and the babies stay in a really thick area with a real huge pine, creepy looking tree, and her and the baby sleep up there. And it's a perfect location. Nobody really will even know. A lot of people go fishing underneath that bridge, and nobody knows. After all that stuff that's out, I go out there and there's somebody fishing. I'm looking at them like, you don't even know, you know what I mean?
It does make you wonder how many people walk around with their eyes closed and just, they don't pay attention. If they knew, I say all the time, people ask me, what's the one thing that, spending so much time in law enforcement, you learn it's like, if you knew what was driving down the road next to you every day, you'd probably never leave your house, let alone Bigfoot. But man, being that close to all that and not knowing it's there is pretty crazy. I got a couple questions about your first encounter. Whenever this thing took off and snapped that tree, number one, how big around was that tree? And number two, did you feel anything? Did you smell anything?
No, I didn't. The day of, I didn't. I thought it was a wash. I didn't feel like something was there. I didn't feel like I was being watched. I didn't even think anything was ever going to happen. I was just going to go home and go back to internet and looked up something else, try to find out another place. And the tree was about, I don't know, probably about that big. It was laying there I was like, that's a pretty big tree. I couldn't break that tree, and no way.
Yeah, that is, man. I don't think people realize how big these things are, man. And until you've seen one, I don't think they really understand how massive they are, or how big they are. And I think you're pretty fortunate to have all those encounters and be here to to talk about it. I personally don't think Bigfoot's your friend. I don't think he's friendly, and I think you mess with the wrong one, you're going to have a really, really bad day. What do you think's kept you safe to this point?
I don't know, stupidity and wisdom. I don't know. I don't know because I think just luck. I didn't feed them a whole lot. I just did it on special occasions, and for leverage because the babies were very crafty. They were little brats, and 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 I would place food out for them and put my recorder in a spot. They would not mess with the food, but they would mess with my recorder, you know. And I did that intentionally. I brought everything. I mean, everything, everything you can think of. I spent over $200 of crap just so they would leave my recorder alone. They were obsessed with it. But I think mostly just I don't know. I think because I gave them the respect and the space they needed, and only one time I felt dread of not going there, and it felt like I wasn't supposed to go there, and I did, and they told me how to leave.
They definitely will do that. And again, man, there's so much to unpack. Why? Number one, I got this question for you. Why do you think that they mess with electronics the way that they do? Why cameras never work? All that stuff. And then secondly, tell us about that encounter, man, where you had that encounter where they made you leave. I want to hear about that.
Well, it wasn't very long, but the trail cameras, obviously they don't want to be filmed, I guess, and they know what that thing is. And I think they have an energy which zaps, you know, devices, batteries, and stuff. Only if they kind of know what it is, because I bring a recorder and they don't zap that. They don't know what it is. There's no lights. There's nothing on it, and they are obsessed with the recorder. I got great things on recorders. I mean, I got burps. I got freaking one of them sounding like a motorcycle. All this crap. And the mom talks a lot. People say that Bigfoots don't talk unless they're spoken to. Wrong. They do. They whisper a lot, like long, dragged out, airy words, which I don't understand them. But she does it a lot, and she's very fascinated by and obsessed with the recorder. Anywhere I put it, she's on it. But the time they told me to leave is when I felt dread. I shouldn't be there. I went down there. I was dropped off, which was stupid because I shouldn't have went down there feeling the way I felt. And so I went down there and I went right into the spot where they go, like right. They come down that hill, they cross the service road, go down into the flood zone, and they go to the water. That's their hot zone right there. That's their honey hole. And I put my tent right there, and bad. And so it was hot. It was like 91 degrees out there, and I'm like sweating like a dog, And I'm like looking at my watch. Okay, well it's 7 o'clock. This should be coming out pretty soon when the sun goes down. And then right when I said that, huge live branch snaps. I mean, it snaps and then splinters, and like there was power behind that. And I got the hint right there. So I took off. I said, okay, all right. I know what they want. They want their space. So I told them I'm going to go down, because about a mile down the road is the Lake Henshaw Resort. It's a campground and a trailer park over there. So I sat there for like, I don't know how many hours, 4 hours, until I was get enough nerve to go back. Am I going back too early? Am I going to have arms when I leave that place? So I went back. I'm here a little early. I'm just going to get in the tent. go to sleep and I'll be leaving tomorrow. So they didn't bother me. They didn't slap my tent. They didn't do nothing. The baby stayed away from me. I heard the baby over by the water digging holes and then cracking rocks inside of it. So I saw that the next morning, little brats. And so I stayed in there and did my thing. And then I left the next day for sure.
That was a smart call on your part, man. I think they do a really good job about pacing people out when they don't want you there. They definitely let you know. Man, that sounds like you were in a really crazy area and have seen a whole lot of stuff. And sometimes I get flack for asking this question, but I got to know, what do you think these things are, man? What do you think they are?
Awesome. That's what I think they are. They're awesome. But I don't know. I don't know what they are. I just, to me, they're probably just like a caveman. I mean, they're strong enough to live in the dinosaur days. I don't know. I don't know what they are.
That's a very honest answer. And I think, none of us can really know what they are. We can have our educated guesses, but it's very interesting to know and hear what people think, man. And that's really crazy, man. I know that you have lived a very, very interesting life, and this is kind of off topic a little bit, but when we were talking earlier, you were telling me about something that happened with you while you're out on some of your travels, with the bear. Man, if you're open to talk about that, I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Okay, so I ride my bike across country. It's a bicycle. It was a GT Aggressor mountain bike, to be exact. And I don't like pannier bags. It's too too detailed. You have to pack everything tightly, and I don't do that. I like to throw my stuff in and go. So I strapped a couple milk crates on the bike, one small one in the front, one on the back, and I hit the road. And I have a dog. I had a dog back then. He passed away since then, but we did a lot of travels together. And so we went all the way across through California, all the way up to Oregon, and I went to Klamath, thinking I was going to go see Klamath Falls, but there's no falls in Klamath. That was a rip off. But then somebody said, "Well, you got to go up toward Crater Lake and Diamond Lake up there. That's where the Klamath Falls are at." I'm like, "Well, that's messed up." So I had to go that way. So I went up to Crater Lake and I went to the backside. I couldn't make it. So I came back down, got rerouted, ended up going to the Diamond Lake Junction and ended up going 14 miles up the mountain. And once I got the top there, and then I had to go, I went to Diamond Lake Campground and just checked out the lake and got a shower and all that. Then I took off and did 9 more miles to Crater Lake. Beautiful lake. Oh, I'm so glad I did it. It was the hardest ride I've ever had. And so I turned around, came back down 9 miles down, and I got to Diamond Lake. I took a shower at one of the campgrounds, which are free in Oregon. And so I came back out and I thought, okay, it's getting late afternoon. I got to get some sleep, but I'm going to get on the road and find a place to camp somewhere. And I always just first camp everywhere I go, even if it's in a town. I'm sleeping on a bench. I'm sleeping in the woods. I don't care where it is. I'm doing the full experience. I'm not gonna get any kind of spoiledness at all. I'm just doing it hardcore the way I want it. So I'm heading down the 138, Highway 138, going down the south side or north side of Diamond Lake. And I'm going down for a little bit. And then I come around this bend and there's a baby bear right there, ran across the highway. I'm like, whoa, that ain't no dog. You know what I mean? You don't see those in San Diego. So I thought, okay, well, baby's gone. And then I went down and I turned right onto this logging road. It looks like they just logged it. 2 deer took off into the opening out there, and there's a lot of debris out there. And so I made a U-turn and went onto the dirt road. And I saw this little area where it looked like a logger might have camped out there. Now, perfect spot, flat, and you can see the road, and you can look up the mountain right there, and it's pretty opened up because they cut all the trees down, of course. And so I pulled my dog off, and I pulled my tent down and just threw it on the ground, and I heard a snap behind me. So I turned around, and the female of that bear was charging us, flying down the mountain, things flying up behind her because it looks like she's not going fast enough already. You know what I mean? She's clawing everything, and her hair's up, her teeth are snapping. And then she heard my dog bark, and she stopped. I think she thought my black dog was her baby. So she was charging me. So my dog barked, and then right after that, I started filming, and then I filmed her by the tree, and then finally she ended up taking off because I yelled like a Bigfoot and made my dog howl, and the bear's tail tucked in and took off.
Good grief, man, Lewis, you're very fortunate to survive that. I think your dog probably saved your life, man. That is crazy. I mean, that is wild. Bears scare me, man. They really do, and I know that wasn't related to Bigfoot, but I wanted our audience to hear that because, man, you've experienced a lot of stuff, and you've seen a lot of things in the woods, and been fortunate enough to live a pretty cool life, man. I know there was probably one more encounter that you want to talk about. So if you want to share that, I know our audience would love to hear it.
Yeah, this one's a cool one. I got it on video too. If you guys want to check it out. A lot of people say, "Well, I want to see that on video." It's all there, buddy. So what happened? I put my recorder out on the. I went out there one time just to throw the recorder out. So I put the recorder out. There's a little levee next to the service road, and on the inside of the gate, the service gate, I go in there and I move a couple leaves back, and I put my recorder in there, wrapped up in a plastic bag, and I leave it there for a week. I come back, I take it home, I listen to it. Now I work at the hospital, so while I'm working, I put my earphones on and I listen to all the footage that I had done for the week. So I put them in there and I just run it. And whenever I hear something, I stop, I put the timestamp on there and what folder it came out of. And then when I get home, I'll dissect everything and put it into certain folders. And so that Bigfoot, that baby one, would run up and down the levee. You can hear going up and down and come up and do tapping noises on the ground with a stick and scrape, 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 and tap, 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 and scrape, scrape, scrape. And then all of a sudden you hear leaves moving. So, and then the leaves moving stopped, and then it started again. So when I came back to get the recorder, what happened was the recorder wasn't where I marked it to be at. It wasn't there. And then I got a stick and I was going through the leaves. I found it 5 feet away from my area where I had it. The baby one found it and re-hit it from me. I was still rolled up in plastic bags. And I'm like, what the heck? That's pretty crafty. That's why I call them little brats, because they are little brats, both of them. And so when I went back again, I went around on the bridge and I looked down and I noticed that the mom, when the baby was running up and down, I guess she laid down on the vegetation and left her body outline. And I got that on video. And so I videotaped that, and I was only one by myself. I couldn't do a size recreation because I zoom in and out and all that. So later, I came back with my sister. Now the grass is different now. I think it was greener when I went back. So what happened was when I did this size recreation, the weeds that are thick on the left side of that body outline are green when I go back. So where it curves and goes up behind me, where the weeds grow and comes over like the shoulder. So that's where the Bigfoot shoulder was. I only went up to the hip bone of the creature on the body outline. So when I was laying there and my sister was on the bridge, I felt uneasy. And so I was like, okay. So I got up, I had my camera in my hand. So I got up and I took 3 pictures. I went home, got on on the internet and checked out my pictures, and I found the male was watching me, and you can clearly see him. He's in where he's standing out inside the bushes next to the tree, and he's leaning over this rock, and his head is out, but he's looking to the side, to his left, looking at me, but he's not facing at me. And where he is bending over at, where his hips are at, comes up to here to me, standing up inside there, and that's where his hip was at, where he's bending over inside that tree. Because I went back in there to check it, and his head is about as big as a 5-gallon bucket, for sure, big and gray. He has black solid eyes. It's kind of hard to see anything right here because you can see his mouth open, but I can't. There's some bushes and stuff in the way, and it's causing blurriness. So so it was hard to see that part. But he had black hair going back and stuff like that. Do you want me to talk about that invisible creatures or no?
No, man, we can go for a little bit longer. I'm sure my audience won't complain, man. They get on to me all the time because some of these aren't long enough. But yeah, let's do it, man. Tell us the story.
Well, I hope you all like this stuff. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about it because I feel honored, you know. But so I went out there on my last day, and I was going to travel like he was saying, travel around on my bicycle. So I wanted to go back and say thank you to them and for not killing me and letting me hang out with their kids and stuff and allowing them to torture me. And so I brought some food, and I felt like I was supposed to bring something for them, like a certain something. So it was hot fudge in a jar. And so, and it seemed like that's what they wanted. I don't know why, but I brought it, and I was doing the video. I have a short video, it's a minute and almost 2 minute long. And then I have a unedited version where you can see the whole part of the video, just so you can see the backstory and why I was filming up there. So I put my camera up and I positioned it toward the mom and the babies where they sleep at. And I kept on telling the camera, you know, keep an eye up there for movement because that's where the babies would come down and make a left or a right on the camera, and you could see them make a right, and then you would see them going by. So I'm showing this stuff, and I didn't know what was up there. I didn't see it when I was there, and I kept pointing up there. And these two little invisible things, one is like 3.5 feet tall, and the other one's 4. You can see. The only reason why I saw it at first because of the light, and so I'm sitting there, but you got to watch it on a big TV. You got to be in a darker room so you can see the blurry. Because when I hold up like that and I go down and I go, that's one, and then when I do that, he turns around. The one on the left turns around and faces the tree, which I'm thinking that's what he does because his eyes disappear. So I know he's facing the tree, and the other one's eyes are still there. And so when I go down to get the next item out of the bag, the one on the left gets paranoid and takes off. So when he takes off, he turns into a ball of light. The one on the next to him looks at him. So you'll see 2 lights running at the same time. But once that other one light disappears and he goes around the tree, the other one that's still there will turn and face the camera. And you'll see 2 white eyes looking right at me. So that was pretty trippy to me because it was a different feeling that I felt than any other time that I've been there for the 12 years. And it was definitely different. And I say it in that other unedited version. I say I feel something's here, you know, and it wasn't the same as the Bigfoot, you know.
That's pretty wild, Lewis. And when you start going down this rabbit hole and you research this stuff and you hear these encounters, I always walk away with more questions than answers. And I think we could sit here all night and talk back and forth and try to figure this thing out. You know, I had a guest come on my show from North Carolina, and he had a really similar experience. He saw these eyes, and long story short, these eyes turned into orbs that hovered above his tent. His dad was with him. His dad saw faces in these orbs. they called on the name of Jesus and they left. But he said that the atmosphere was not, it was not good. It was a very not good experience. And it really shook him, and it just makes you wonder, man, these things, who knows what to do with that? What do you do with that kind of stuff, man? And that is really, really wild. And guys, I've not seen any of his videos, but we will make sure to drop a link down below so you guys can go watch them. And man, I what do you think those were? Like, what do you think? What do you do with that? What do you think that was, Liz?
Well, I have a picture of it. I don't know if anybody knows Ken King. Yeah, he's a Bigfoot researcher too, out of Arkansas. He sent me a picture, and it looks like an owl's head, has the circles also around the eyes, but they're white, and the bottom part looks like a penguin, but it has hands, and they're only like 3.5 foot, 5 foot tall. And they said that's some of the shorter ones, but they hang out in Bigfoot areas, and they live down and in the tree root areas and underneath the trees, or inside like tree cavities and stuff. And that's what they say. But yeah, there's another guy in another country that he does this stuff, and these little creatures come out, and that's what they look like. I mean, that's the size of what I'm seeing, on that. Because I went back and I kind of put the camera up and I measured the tree and all that stuff, and I kind of get an idea of the sizes. That's why I'm saying those sizes. They're kind of small, but it's pretty trippy. I was very shocked that I saw those.
Encounter number 6.
So it's about 2:30 in the afternoon, April 2nd of 2012. It was kind of overcast. And the way my property is it's kind of rectangular shaped, and there's like a finger hill of land, and the top part of the hill is bare, and that's where the house and the barn are located. And then it kind of drops off on either side, on both east and west sides. And on the west side, even with my barn, I've got a small pond, and the other side's just kind of a gully. And the forest comes right up close to the house. On the west side, it starts about 20 feet from the house. So it's pretty heavily wooded, hardwood forest, oak trees and hickory are mostly. But anyway, I was going out to get this firewood that I had cut, and I had this little spot on top of the hill. It was kind of a turnaround. So I'm just getting ready to go into the turnaround, and probably 100 feet away, right at the edge of the tree line, I see a dark figure. It looked about man size, pretty good sized head. Shoulders were sort of wide, but not overly. Looked about man size from my perspective. And I'm in my truck and I'm like, no way. And I had to I was just going into my turn. I kind of looked away for a second so I wouldn't run over a locust tree with the big thorns and get a flat tire. And when I looked back, it was gone. Now I could have stepped 2 steps and been behind trees where I couldn't have seen it, because there were some oak trees there that over the winter the leaves hadn't dropped off, and they were smaller. Anyway, I pulled up where I was going to load up my wood, and was only about 100 feet from where I'd seen this. And I didn't see it again, and I looked over my shoulder a lot while I was grabbing the firewood, and I only took about half of what I was going to. I figured that's enough, just in case. And I went into the house, and that was that. I called the sheriff's department and asked if anybody had seen a Bigfoot, and they said no. And then they told me to call the conservation officer, and I did. And the guy said, well, we haven't had any reports of them. He goes, but they're not a protected species. He said, so my advice is if you see one, just shoot it in the face. And I said, well, what is wrong with you? I said, I wasn't threatened or anything. It was just there. It wasn't hurting anything. And so then I checked around and read a whole bunch of stuff. Once I realized they were here, I didn't know how many there were. And so I kind of reached out to them, and I would put out a little snack for them once in a while. And I had a shovel by this burn barrel where You know, you get an old place, you inherit a bunch of old junk, and there's a bunch of old rotten wood and plastic, and just where the previous owners had been dumping junk. So I took a burn barrel down there, and I'm burning everything that'll burn and all the prickly briars and stuff. And I'm shoving that in, and off to my west, I'm kind of facing west, and I'm below the dam, and there's a little bit of a gully there, and that's where a lot of this stuff was. And from a little bit to the west of me, I hear some movement, and it sounds like something big. And it comes and it gets about 75 feet away from me, I'd say, and it's behind this clump of oak trees that are probably about a foot in diameter. There's probably about 7 of them making a group, and you can't really make out much, but you could see black. And it was getting to be about May, so that's right about when everything starts leafing out. So like a week later, you can't hardly see anything in the forest because all the leaves have sprung. But it was just right before that, and you could kind of see something black, dark. And I'm doing my thing, and pretty soon, I don't know if it was a pebble or an acorn or hickory nut or something, but something comes kind of flying over and hits a piece of tin in the junk by me. And I thought, okay, I know what this is, because it's not a bear, thank goodness. Bears don't throw things. And the only thing I can think of in the forest that I know is there is either a man or a Bigfoot. And it seemed like a young one being kind of playful. And I thought, okay. I kind of laughed, and I said, it's okay. You don't need to be afraid. I won't hurt you. And I'm doing my thing. Pretty soon, another one comes zinging over. And it was near me, not at me. I want to clarify on that, because some people think just because something flies and hits in your general direction means they're throwing at you, when they're more trying to get your attention or possibly intimidate rather than trying to hurt you. And then the creek was to the north, and then I heard some noise that way. I heard some branches breaking, and it sounded like they were, good rake handle size or so. And that was moving in from the north. And I thought, And in my mind, I was thinking, this sounds like typical primate behavior. And I was thinking of, like, for example, what happens when 2 rival groups of chimps come together, how they do a lot of stuff with throwing rocks and breaking branches, and as a way to intimidate their rivals. And I thought, okay, there's 2 of them, and there's just me, and I'm not armed or anything. I guess this is a good time to go up to the house and get something cold to drink. It was not one of my more gallant moments, but, hey, it is what it is. And then after that, I had been down there again, and I was noticing here an awful lot of owl calls, and they were even during the day. And, it seemed like there were too many owls in the area for it to, they're pretty territorial, so you would expect, like in the spring, a pair, not 3, right? Unless you're hearing some conflict. Because they'll usually drive a rival out of their territory, right? And anyway, so I realized that it was these Bigfoot, they were mimicking the owls so that they could blend in. And, over time, I'd hear all kinds of different weird stuff. You'd hear them whoop. You'd hear tree knocking. And, if you weren't really trying to concentrate on listening for it, you really didn't notice it. And then you'd hear something howling with the coyotes that wasn't a coyote that would get them all going. And you'd hear it from more than one place. You'd hear groups that sound like about, handful of coyotes would sound off in one spot, and then you hear something that howled, I don't know, kind of like a werewolf or something, it kind of sounds like, from another spot, and then another spot. And, sometimes you'd hear an awful lot of them, and it just didn't seem to make sense. And, then you'd hear the owl calls, and then they'd morph to crow. Well, crows and owls don't get along. And when it's dark, crows don't make noise, because if they do, an owl can see in the dark and he'll kill the crow. So we got calls that are morphing from owl to crow, and then they almost get sounded kind of similar to an excited chimpanzee kind of noise. So I kind of figured out that it was the females doing this. And so I read that they said don't whistle in the woods. So I kind of would do a 4-toot whistle that would mimic their owl call, and they'd call back. And then a lot of times I'd stand out on my deck at night, and it was dark because my only yard light where the deck is, the house blocks it, so you're pretty well in the dark. And then off to the east is a gully through there. And there's an old car parked down in the bottom, or I guess I should say not parked, but it was like an old 50s car, and somebody rolled it down into the gully when they were done with it because it was junk. And on the next hillside there, you would hear this. And there were a couple times where I had heard it, and I'd been out with the spotlight, and I was able to spotlight them. Now, this one time, it was where the raspberries grow. I had heard the owl-like calls, and I hit the spotlight, and I saw 2 bright green glowing eyes and a black head, and it ducked. Now here, I've seen them up close several times. I've caught them peeking in the windows. They've come in the house. They've stolen stuff, borrowed stuff. But when you see them up close, the ones that are here, their eyes will glow brilliant green, and they've got real thick hair. It's all black, and their hair is kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is the hair on their head. They got a thick mop of hair, kind of reminds you of like a string mop, like Raggedy Ann hair or something. But now when you see them, the only part on the face that you'll see skin is like right like this. It's right around the eyes and the nose, and because their bangs come down and cover the forehead, and the rest of the face, even on the females and the young females, it'll be covered with not a real thick beard, but there's a beard. And their skin is gray, and it's a flat color of gray, kind of about the color of tree bark. And I found footprints here from about 12 inches to 24 inches. The male tracks will go up to 24 inches, and that's a full-grown adult male, and he's 12 feet tall. And he's pretty massive. Now, the way I figured this out is one night I was sitting here where I'm at right now in front of the computer, and my kitchen is that way. And I look to my left, and in the kitchen, I've got a steel door, and it's one of those where sometimes they put the piece of plastic to make it look like it's got a whole bunch of little windows, but it's just got one big window in it. Steel door. Then I've got my little deck. It's about 10 foot square. Then there's an awning. And then there's one of these braces that come down that it's a support for the awning. There's 2 of them. And they're kind of, like those steel rails they put on the concrete steps. It's kind of like that, but it's just, the double rail that goes up to support this fiberglass awning. Anyway, so I seen a Bigfoot standing there next to the deck looking at me through the window. And when I did, he kind of squinted his eyes, and he turned, and he was gone into the darkness because he's black. And that was inside the yard. I have my backyard fenced in for my dogs because I don't let them run. Anyway, then the following morning I went out and I looked, and I could see approximately where the top of his head was. So I brought my tape measure and I measured up, and that was where I figured the top of his head was. That was like 9 feet tall, and I could see just a faint impression of a footprint. So I went around to the edge of the deck where he was standing next to the railing, and the footprint that was there was 18 inches in length. And I've seen a lot of weird. I've seen orbs with Bigfoot, encounters on 2 occasions. They looked like, I would say, they were white, probably the size of a volleyball, and up in a tree. And they didn't last very long, and they went out. But the thing that really seemed surprising is it was this brilliant white light, but it didn't radiate any light.
Every time I hear an encounter, I always walk away with way more questions than I do answers. And a lot of times after I've interviewed somebody, I'll go back to the interview and I'm editing this stuff. And I'm like, man, why didn't I ask that? Or why didn't I go that direction with the episode? But there's just so many questions and so many things that I want to know. And I just have had to come to terms that, like, I'm never going to know the answers to a lot of this stuff. And we may never understand some of the things in God's universe that goes on. But maybe we can learn a little bit together. And I've got a pretty good snapshot of this cryptid world now. I've been doing this for 2 years and I think over 200 episodes. And, there's a lot of things I do know. There's still a whole lot that I don't. But I know it's fun. I know it's a lot of entertainment to sit here and listen to these stuff. I know it's very traumatic for people that have had these encounters. And hopefully this has given them a safe place to get this stuff off their chest and to talk about these encounters. And then if you've listened to any of these encounters and any of these people's stories and they resonate with you, if you have something that you know that can help them, reach out to me and I'll get you in contact with them. A lot of people come on the show looking for answers. And like I said, we might not have all of them, but maybe we can get a couple of pieces to the puzzle, and that always makes a difference. But I just want to say thanks for being here. I hope you're enjoying these shows. If there's something you would like to hear, you can always reach out to me. If you've had an encounter, I would love to hear it. You can always email me at mysteriesunknownpodcast@gmail.com. I'm thankful for every one of you guys, and I'm just grateful that you're a part of Mysteries Unknown. So shout out to my members, shout out to all the subscribers, and just people that listen and people that share their encounters. Couldn't do it without you guys. I'm going to say it. Can't get off here without doing it. Stay prayed up. We'll see you in the next episode.